Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the special council meeting of Friday, December the 17th. Councillors Trainer and Van Alphen, I see you on Zoom. Thank you for joining us. Are there any late items not on the agenda to introduce? Okay, thank you. So approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Holmes and Carlson, all in favor? If you're able to, councillors on Zoom, could you turn your, thank you, Great. Okay, so on to 4.1, fees and charges amendment, electric and sewer fees, bylaw number 2021-053, and water utilities and water rate bylaw amendment number 2021-054, and this is simply for adoption. Do you have any sage words, Mr. Svetlichny?
None, Madam Mayor. As you mentioned, it's for adoption, and it's a culmination of about 4 to 5 months worth of work from everybody. So it's nice to have it completed.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions for Dave? Could I ask someone to bring forward a motion, please? Councillor Holmes? Move to adopt. Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Carlson? And all in favor. If there's no discussion, okay, all in favor. Thank you. On to 4.2, solar and storage project options update. And Graham, you're going to speak to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I will speak to this. Our Director of Utilities is on a much-deserved break today, so I'll be happy to speak to this item. And what I'll do is actually walk fairly closely through the report, which I prepared just this morning based on latest information. And so starting, of course, with the background, the December 13th meeting, Council did recall that there was these 4 options we put to Council for de-scoping the solar and storage project. And through the course of discussion, Council narrowed that down to 2 options and directed staff to engage the funder of the original grant to see if they had any insights at the staff level that we work with on the 2 options. And of course, those 2 options are summarized as follows. The first option was a BESS only project. That's the battery energy storage system. And in that option, the solar component would be removed and the project would focus just on the battery only, and the associated peak savings. It'd be a big battery, so we get good peak savings. It would be conducted off the original site. There'd be no reason to keep it there, as it's just a couple of construction cans full of batteries hooked up to the electrical grid, and Council allowed us to use their sound professional discretion on where precisely that'd be located. And that would be also within the entirely contained within the existing grant allocation and the district's contribution. The second option is a smaller solar and battery project, and in this case it'd be the same location but just going down in size, both down in size on the solar panels but also down in size on the battery. And so in that sense, a variation of the original concept but in the same location. And we did attach in the Council's materials today that previous report with all the technical details of those 2 options. So on the 15th of December, we had a meeting with the funder, contacts that we work with to describe the cost escalation challenges the district was facing, and also to describe for them the 2 options that we were exploring. And we did convey to them that the purpose of the meeting was just to gain their insights. We understand there's a formal process, we have to work through it, but looking for their wisdom and perspective on how we might frame a submission, and indeed anything else they could share with us. The results of that meeting on the 15th was they said they would have to caucus amongst each other and get back to us, and the likelihood would be that it wouldn't be until the new year. I did convey to them we had a council meeting on Friday, and I was hoping to report back in some way, but they couldn't make any promises. And then in fact, this morning they reached out and said they were able to move some things around, had their caucus conversation, and had some advice for us. So I did take that call, and hence the origin of this report today. And what they were able to tell us in summary from their perspective is that option one, that's the battery only, will almost certainly trigger a major scope change, as this option removes the solar element and it changes the original intent of the project from their perspective, which was to test the battery and solar integration together as one project. It also changes the location of the project. And so that part wasn't really a big surprise in that we anticipated probably option one would trigger a major scope change, and they did confirm that. Something interesting they told us was that the original 2017 funding criteria are actually very important in the evaluation of any descope request. And that's because particularly if a major scope change is triggered, what actually happens is the validity of that revised project is then assessed based on the rescoring against the original criteria from 2017. Sort of almost like you go back to that time. Okay, what was the context? What was the thinking? What was the priorities of the day from a government perspective? And solar production and a focus on renewable energy were important elements in that funding cycle at that time. So that was insightful. Option one could proceed as a rescope request at the district's discretion. Again, this BESS only project, and it would still be evaluated through the regular process, but it was their assessment that the strong possibility that the revised project would score below the threshold without the solar generation elements in the revised vision. So one other thing they did tell us is the district's estimate of 3 months for a final decision was actually a good estimate in a major scope context, if option one is what council ends up going with. And then option two, the smaller solar and battery project can reasonably be assumed to be a minor scope change, which was also our initial guess. So we were right on that. And they believe it'll be minor because it maintains the original intent applied for with the solar and battery components and their integration into one project. It also maintains the same location, which has been socialized with the community through planning and communication. This is something I wrote down carefully. From their view, the project serves the population in essentially the same way as it was originally intended. Even though the project is reduced in option two in its size, one of the things they sort of relayed to us is that if the site is capable of hosting future expansion on that footprint, that would likely help the reconsideration and evaluation of option two, if that's the way council goes. If there is a reasonable intent on the part of the district to achieve this. And in fact, when I looked back at the presentation and the report submitted on the 13th, that is something we had contemplated, is we could still do the original civil work in case, maybe prices come down or it's a great success and we want to augment. Apparently that's something they think could actually really help the proposal, because it shows that we're still trying to achieve that original vision, which obviously is very important to them. If it's minor, a scope change, again, this option two, the decision for a grant amendment could be made with the technical committee's discretion, so they confirm that. It wouldn't have to go to the management committee. One thing they noted, which was interesting, is that probably is going to be weeks and not months. We had booked 2 months in our estimate for that technical committee review, but they said it could actually be a lot quicker than that. So that's a plus. If the initial assessment by the contacts we're working with at the funder are correct, it was relayed that option two would likely only require a detailed rationale and explanation of the descope request in a correspondence format. Can be turned around quickly. And conversely, option one, in triggering a major scope change, One of the things they told me today that I thought was interesting is it would actually be more of a full reapplication and rescoring process, first to the technical committee and then to the management committee for review. And that's rather involved. The original application process is quite significant, but we certainly could do it. It would just, again, we'd endeavor to do so in the 3-month timeline that we've allocated for that. While either option can be considered at the district's discretion, of course, I would say overall the initial assessment of the funder and the folks that we work with there, that option 2 carries much less risk than option 1, both in terms of the timeline and the financial consideration of continued grant funding. And so, again, from a financial implications perspective, either one can be done within the $6 million. And that has been confirmed with our owner's engineer. And that, of course, includes on top of that the district's committee or commitment rather of the $980,000 from the electrical reserve that we've contemplated. So in conclusion, and as council will see the motion that's in the report, and in light of the procurement timelines that we're working against, the construction timelines as well, and this initial informal assessment from staff at the funder, it is our recommendation from staff that council direct staff to proceed with the option 2, which is the reduced solar and battery project on the existing location. And with that, I conclude the report. We can certainly take any questions.
Okay. Questions, Council? Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Giants Head Road project went up about $700,000 between approval and 3 weeks later determining the how we were going to finance it, and the solar project went up, $3.5 million. And I wondered about the district's component for infrastructure upgrades and such for the solar project. Hasn't changed from the $980,000 originally sort of budgeted. Has that been examined to see if it's gone up as well? The scope of the work that we were going to be responsible for?
That's a great question. Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Through the mayor, I did have that quick conversation with our Director of Utilities a few weeks ago, so not today because he's off. But he did confirm that when they originally estimated the $980,000, they did so with sort of some elbow room there for growth, and the pieces that we're taking care of in terms of those tie-ins and various pieces haven't escalated with the same rate of acceleration as some of the other pieces that are causing project price challenges right now, like the batteries and the solar panels. So we do still believe that the 980 is okay, and in the either of these options with the reduced form, whether it's just batteries or with the reduced solar and battery component, there should be significant elbow room there in that 980K, unless of course, and just how much we decide if it's an option 2 scenario, do we maybe actually build out some of those additional civil work for future expansion. But if it looked like there was pressure on the budget on that 980, we would certainly have the ability to dial back the expansion of the civil for future use at the solar site. So we are feeling pretty comfortable in the 980,000 at this time still.
Any other, Councillor Carlson?
Just wondering if this option is chosen, would anything about the potential for the eco-village and the connection through be included in any of that, or would we keep that as a separate conversation? Or like, would it help us to make sure that we're moving forward in the right direction?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Great question. Through the mayor, we did make an effort on the 15th to convey to them that the district is currently contemplating the eco-village as in the vicinity of the solar project. And, obviously we're still in early stages in the connectivity of those two things and how one might be enhanced by the other and all that. we were on a Teams meeting with the funder staff, and it was clear to me that piqued their attention a little bit. And I did indicate that, you know, if it was an option 2 scenario, it would be our purpose to try and put in there that the district has, because of, you know, it was almost like the solar and battery site has been a bit of a catalyst to get us thinking about other things in that same vicinity, and including the eco village, and they nodded quite vigorously that might be of assistance. So even though no final decisions have been made with respect to the eco village, they were interested in it, including our mention, I should say, also working with the Penticton Indian Band, having them on site with elected officials up there, the archaeological assessments now underway, because they do really like to see that, you know, not only the vision of that, but also the connection in with area communities, including the First Nation communities around us.
No. Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just a question through our CEO, if I heard you correctly. So with a downsized scope of this project, solar and battery storage, you're still proposing to sterilize the entire land for possible development of housing?
So where the existing solar and storage site, thank you, Councillor Van Alphen, through the mayor. So the option 2 does envision the existing solar and battery location, but in a reduced form. And it would certainly be at council's discretion whether or not we just, you know, stick to that reduced form and then explore other uses of what lands might become usable up and around that site. Or we could keep that area for, as indicated, we could keep that area for future expansion, which the funders seemed to hint that would help our application on a resubmission, but it certainly is not something we have to put in there. So I'd certainly appreciate if there is council guidance on that. Another thing that council might recall in an option 2 scenario that we put in the last report is that the panels might be raised. It would add some cost, but it could help us for some aesthetics, and it's something we could explore as well. You know, raising the panels, which might allow some parking and maybe some shaded areas for other uses, such as picnic tables and bike parking and this sort of thing, which kind of doubles up on the ability to use that footprint. But in a short answer to your question is, it's an area that we would like some council guidance on. Do we just stick with the smaller project, or do we plan for potential future expansion to more towards the original scope?
Councillor Holmes.
Can't we just leave that vague at the moment? I mean, something we can decide at another point and not really included in the application one way or another?
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. We absolutely can do that.
It would be my preference to kind of leave it open like that as well, as Councillor Holmes was suggesting. For a number of reasons, we don't know what that land ultimately might be used for, whether it's an expansion or whether we're still waiting to hear from the Penticton Indian Band on the archaeological assessment. And so, I mean, there's a few fairly big ifs out there still. So, including what Councillor Barkle brought up about the extra money that might be required to do that kind of work. I think that we should maybe, you know, pause on that. That's just my thought. Any other questions? Councillor Traynor, you're good? Okay. You're good? Okay. Could I have someone bring forward a motion, please? Councillor Carlson?
I don't have it in front of me, but I'd like to move the staff recommendation that we go with option 2 of the solar battery project in the same location at a scaled down level.
Okay, and the first part of that is that staff prepare and submit correspondence to the funder to request a de-scoping of the original solar and storage project. Great, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Holmes? Any further discussion? Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
I know that 4 out of 7 councillors are going to want to go with solar and feel that maybe a bird in the hand. It's still not a bird in the hand. The potential, the closer bird in the hand is going to be better than the one that's out there in the bush. Being that the battery storage project, even though it can be argued that it is more attractive, is more risky, that we would wind up with nothing at all. But I still can't support it because I don't feel like any kind of solar project on this reduced scope or not is appropriate use of that land and financially worthwhile. Even matter of fact, it's even less financially worthwhile than it was before because the production will be less than it was before. The land is worth more than it was before. So to me, it's even less attractive.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Barkwell and Councillor Van Elfen. Okay, thank you. That carries. And now if someone could bring forward a resolution to close the meeting, please. Councillor Carlson and Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Great, thank you.